I need you to listen to me for a moment. Not because I want your attention, not because I want to convince you of something, but because there are moments in life when a person realizes that silence can become the greatest mistake they ever make. And I feel like I am standing in one of those moments right now. There are only a few things in this world that can truly scare someone who has spent years building, creating, solving impossible problems, and facing uncertainty every single day. Failure is not one of them. Loss is not the loss of money, not the loss of success, not the loss of recognition. I mean the loss of someone who quietly became a part of your thoughts before you even realized it was happening. Someone whose voice became a place of peace. Someone whose absence could make an entire room feel empty. Someone who could walk into your life without making noise, without demanding anything, and somehow leave a mark deeper than anything you ever planned for. That is the kind of loss I am afraid of, and tonight I am not speaking to the world. I am speaking only to you, the woman who might be wondering why I am saying these words, the woman who might be asking herself if this is really about her. The woman who might have spent years being strong for everyone else, carrying responsibilities, hiding emotions, and convincing herself that needing someone was a weakness. But I know something. The strongest people are often the ones who are the most afraid to admit they have something to lose. And I have something to lose. I have you. Or at least, I have the possibility of losing you. Maybe you think that sounds dramatic. Maybe you think people say things like this all the time, but there is a difference between saying you are afraid of losing someone and actually feeling the weight of what their absence would create. Have you ever looked at someone and realized that your entire future quietly included them? Not in a fantasy, not in a childish dream, but in the small, ordinary moments, the morning conversations, the quiet dinners, the moments when nothing special happens. But somehow everything feels special because that person is there. Have you ever imagined a future where someone is missing and felt a strange emptiness before that future even arrived? Because that is where I am. I am standing between what I built and what I could lose, and the hardest part is that I cannot control this. I can create technology, I can build systems, I can predict patterns, I can spend years studying problems that seem impossible and find solutions. But love does not work that way. Love does not listen to calculations. Love does not follow a perfect strategy. Love asks you to step forward without knowing if someone will step toward you. And that is terrifying, because the older we become, the more carefully we choose what we give our hearts to. When you are young, you think love is about excitement. You think it is about butterflies and perfect moments. But later in life, you understand something much deeper. Love is about trust. It is about finding someone you can finally stop performing for. Someone who sees the person behind the achievements, behind the confidence, behind the image everyone else sees. Someone who notices when you are tired, even when you say you are fine. Someone who hears the silence behind your words. And I wonder, have you ever had someone who made you feel completely seen? Not admired, not impressed. Seen, because there is a difference. Many people can celebrate what you achieve. Very few people care about who you are when there is nothing to celebrate. And maybe that is why this moment feels so dangerous, because somewhere along the way, you became more than a person I wanted beside me. You became someone I wanted to protect, someone I wanted to understand, someone I wanted to choose even when choosing became complicated. But I have to admit something difficult. There were moments when I almost convinced myself that walking away would be easier. And that is the part I am ashamed to say. Not because I stopped caring, but because caring became frightening. Have you ever wanted something so deeply that you started searching for reasons to lose it? Have you ever pushed away a beautiful thing because you were afraid of what it would mean if you truly allowed yourself to have it? Sometimes we do not run from things because they are wrong. Sometimes we run because they are right. Because the more someone matters, the more power they have to hurt us. And I have spent a lifetime building things that cannot hurt me. Machines cannot reject you. Ideas cannot leave you. Projects cannot wake up one morning and decide they need a different future. But a person can. A heart can change. A promise can become uncertain. A beautiful beginning can become a painful memory. And maybe that is why I waited. Maybe that is why I did not say everything I should have said when I had the chance. Maybe I thought there would always be more time. But time has a way of teaching people a painful lesson. The things we delay are sometimes the things we lose. I need you to understand something. This is not about a perfect love story. I do not believe in perfect. I believe in two imperfect people deciding that what they have is worth protecting. I believe in conversations when things are difficult. I believe in forgiveness after mistakes. I believe in choosing each other again after the excitement fades and reality arrives. Because real love is not tested when everything is easy. Real love is tested when fear enters the room, when doubts appear, when two people have to decide whether their connection is stronger than their uncertainty. And right now, I am facing that decision. But before I tell you what happened, before I tell you why this moment became so important, I need you to know something. There is a reason I am saying these words today. There is a reason I could not keep pretending everything was fine. There is something I have been carrying quietly. Something I did not want to admit because I thought admitting it would make me weaker. But maybe hiding the truth was the thing that was actually creating distance between us. I have watched people lose the ones they love because they waited for the perfect moment. They waited until they had the perfect words, the perfect confidence, the perfect situation. And then one day they realized the moment they were waiting for had already passed. I do not want that to happen. I do not want to wake up one day and realize I was too careful with the one person I should have been brave with. So I am asking you something that might be difficult. When someone loves you deeply but struggles to express it, do you see their silence as a lack of love? Or do you wonder what they might be fighting inside themselves? When someone takes longer to open their heart, do you assume they do not care? Or do you understand that sometimes the deepest feelings are the ones people are most afraid to reveal? I want you to think about that, because there was a moment when I thought I had already lost you. A moment when I looked at everything we had and wondered if my hesitation had destroyed something precious. And I have to tell you, that moment changed me. After that, I stopped asking myself whether I was ready. I started asking myself whether I could survive the regret of never trying, and that question is heavier than fear, because fear tells you to protect yourself. Regret asks you why you protected yourself from the one thing you actually wanted. So if you are still listening, I want you to know something. Your presence here matters to me, not because of a number, not because of attention, because for a few moments, it feels like you are giving me the one thing I needed most. A chance to finally say what I could not say before. And if you feel something in these words, if some part of you understands this quiet battle between love and fear, stay with me. I would love to know where you are watching from, because sometimes distance feels smaller when two hearts are sharing the same moment. And if you feel connected to this conversation, I hope you will subscribe and stay close, because I believe some messages find us exactly when we need them. But I still have not told you the real reason yet. I haven't told you the real reason yet. And the truth is, even saying those words makes me nervous, because the real reason is not something simple. It is not just about missing you. It is not just about fear. It is about a choice I almost made, a choice that could have changed everything, a choice that, for a moment, made me believe that protecting my heart was more important than fighting for yours. And that is the part I have struggled to forgive myself for. Because when you have spent your life solving problems, you start believing every problem has a logical answer. But love creates questions that no formula can solve. Do you choose comfort or courage? Do you choose certainty or possibility? Do you choose the life that feels safe or the person who makes life feel meaningful? I stood in front of that choice, and I almost chose the wrong thing. I almost convinced myself that leaving quietly would hurt less than staying and risking everything. I almost believed that distance would protect us. But distance does something dangerous. It does not always heal. Sometimes it simply gives people enough space to disappear from each other's lives. And the thought of that happening scared me more than anything. Because what if the person you were meant to fight for becomes the person you lose because you were afraid to fight? What if the apology you were saving for tomorrow becomes the apology that arrives too late? What if the love you were too careful with becomes the memory you spend years trying to understand? Those questions stayed with me. They followed me into quiet moments. They appeared when everything around me was successful, but something inside me still felt unfinished. And then I realized something painful. A person can build an empire and still feel powerless when it comes to one heart. A person can change the world and still struggle to say 3 simple words to the person who matters most. I love you, not as a temporary emotion, not as a beautiful sentence, but as a decision to be present, a decision to be honest, a decision to stop running when something becomes real. And I need you to know, the reason I am telling you this now is because I reached a point where silence became more painful than vulnerability. But the truth I discovered after that point is something I never expected. And it changed the way I saw everything. The truth I discovered after that point was something I never expected. And it changed the way I saw everything. because I realized that sometimes the person we are most afraid of losing is also the person who teaches us the most about ourselves. You showed me something I had spent years avoiding. You showed me that control is not the same as security. I spent so much of my life trying to predict outcomes, trying to prepare for every possible failure, trying to make sure nothing could surprise me. But you surprised me, not because you were unpredictable, because you made me feel something I had forgotten existed. You made me feel like I did not have to have every answer before I was allowed to love someone, and that scared me. It scared me because I was comfortable being the person who solves problems. I was comfortable being the person others depended on. I was comfortable carrying responsibility. But when it came to you, I was no longer just someone making decisions. I was someone with something to lose, and that changed everything. Have you ever met someone who made you realize the walls you built were not protecting you anymore? They were keeping you away from the very thing you wanted? Because that was my reality. I thought my distance was maturity. I thought my hesitation was wisdom. I thought protecting myself meant I was being careful. But maybe I was just afraid. Maybe I was afraid that if I gave you the real version of me, not the confident version, not the successful version, not the version that always knows what to do, you might see everything I was trying to hide, the doubts, the insecurities, the moments when I wonder if I am enough. People assume confidence means you never question yourself. They do not see the private battles. They do not see the nights when someone sits alone and wonders whether the person they love would still choose them if they saw every imperfect part. And that is the question I want to ask you. If you saw every fear I carry, every mistake I regret, every moment when I was not as strong as I appeared, would you still look at me the same way? Or would you quietly step away? That question stayed with me longer than I want to admit. Because love is not frightening when you are showing someone your best moments. Love becomes frightening when you realize you are asking someone to accept your unfinished parts too. And I think that is where many people lose each other. Not because they stop caring, because they stop revealing. They become strangers while still standing next to each other. They hide their worries. They hide their pain. They hide the words they are desperate to say. And one day they wake up and realize they have been protecting themselves from the person who wanted to understand them. I never wanted that for us, but I almost created it. There was a moment when I convinced myself that maybe you deserved someone easier. Someone who could give you certainty without hesitation. Someone who never struggled with fear. Someone who could promise everything without thinking about the responsibility behind those promises. And that thought nearly destroyed me. Because for a moment, I believed walking away was an act of love. I thought maybe leaving you would protect you from my doubts. Maybe disappearing would save you from my confusion. But then I asked myself the hardest question. What if I was not protecting you? What if I was just protecting myself? What if I was using a beautiful excuse to avoid the risk of being truly known? That question hurt because I knew the answer. And I hated it because the truth is, sometimes we do not leave because we stopped loving someone. Sometimes we leave because loving someone asks us to become a version of ourselves we are not sure we can become. It asks us to communicate instead of disappear. It asks us to apologize instead of defend ourselves. It asks us to stay when everything inside us says run. And I was standing at that exact place, between running and staying, between the life where nothing could hurt me, and the life where something mattered enough to break my heart. I need you to understand something. I did not hesitate because you were not important. I hesitated because you were the first person who made the consequences feel real. Before you, losing something was just a setback. After you, losing something felt like losing a piece of the future I had imagined. And that is a terrifying feeling. Because once someone becomes part of your future, you stop thinking only about today. You start thinking about years. You start imagining small moments. You start wondering what their hand would feel like in yours during difficult times. You start wondering who they would become and whether you would still be there beside them. You start caring about things that have not even happened yet. That is what love does. It makes the future feel personal. But there was something you did not know. Something I kept hidden because I was afraid of what it would reveal. The moment when I almost walked away was not because I stopped believing in us. It happened because someone else entered my life. And before you misunderstand me, listen carefully. This is not a story about betrayal. This is a story about confusion. A story about a moment when I was tired, a moment when fear was louder than love, a moment when someone offered me something that looked simple, something that looked safe, someone who did not ask difficult questions, someone who did not challenge my fears, Someone who made everything feel easy, and for a moment, a very dangerous moment, Abe thought maybe easy was what I needed. Have you ever been so exhausted from fighting for something that peace starts looking like love? Have you ever confused comfort with connection? Because that is what almost happened to me. I almost chose the person who required less from me instead of the person who meant more to me, and admitting that is painful, because you deserve honesty, not a perfect story, not a story where I pretend I never doubted. You deserve the truth. The truth is that there was a moment when I looked at two different paths. One path was quiet, predictable. The other path was uncertain, complicated, full of emotion, but it had something the first path did not. It had you. And I did not know which one I would choose. That uncertainty changed me, because for the first time, I understood how people can lose something precious without ever intending to. They do not always lose love because they stop caring. Sometimes they lose love because they become afraid of how much they care. And I was afraid. I was afraid that choosing you meant accepting that I could not control the outcome. I was afraid that giving you my heart meant giving someone else the power to hurt me. I was afraid that if this ended, I would have no explanation, no solution, no way to repair it. And that feeling followed me everywhere. I could distract myself, it could work. I could focus on everything else. But when the noise disappeared, there was always the same question waiting. Why are you running from the one person you want to find? That question broke something inside me, because I realized I was not protecting my future. I was risking it. I was standing so close to losing something rare, because I was too focused on avoiding pain, and then came the moment I will never forget, the moment when I realized you might actually be gone, not angry, not fighting, just gone. And that silence was heavier than any argument, because anger means someone still cares enough to react. Silence can mean someone has already accepted losing you. That thought terrified me. I wondered if you had finally decided you were tired. Tired of waiting. Tired of guessing. Tired of wondering where you stood in my life, and maybe you had every right to feel that way. Maybe I had spent too much time, expecting you to understand feelings I never had the courage to explain. Maybe I was asking you to read a book I never opened for you, and that was unfair. So I sat with the possibility that I had lost you, and for the first time, I stopped thinking about what I wanted. I thought about what I had almost destroyed. I thought about the woman who gave me reasons to believe in something deeper. The woman who did not just see what I could build. The woman who saw what I was carrying. And that realization broke me in a way I never expected. Because I understood that the biggest risk was not loving you. The biggest risk was pretending I could live without you. But there is still something I have not told you. Something that happened after that moment. Something that forced me to make the hardest decision of my life, because when I finally decided what I wanted, almost became too late, and the next thing that happened changed everything. When I finally decided what I wanted, it almost became too late, because sometimes life does not wait for us to become brave. Sometimes the moment we finally find the courage to speak is the same moment when someone else has already started learning how to live without hearing from us. And that is a painful truth. A truth I wish I had understood earlier. I used to believe that if something was meant to be, it would always find its way back. But I was wrong. Some things are meant to be protected. Some people are meant to be chosen. Some connections are not lost because they were not strong enough. They are lost because someone was too afraid to fight for them, and that realization changed me, because I started thinking about all the moments I could have chosen differently. The conversations I avoided, the feelings I hid, the times when I wanted to reach out but convinced myself that waiting was the mature thing to do. Have you ever looked back at a moment and realized you were only one decision away from changing everything? One message, one conversation, one honest confession, one moment of courage, and yet somehow fear made that one moment feel impossible. That was me. I was standing at the edge of something beautiful, but instead of stepping forward, I was calculating the distance I could fall. I was measuring the pain before I even experienced it. I was preparing for heartbreak before giving love a real chance, and I need you to know something. That was not because you were not worth the risk. It was because you were the biggest risk I had ever wanted to take. You were not a temporary feeling. You were not a passing thought. You became the person I imagined during ordinary moments. The person I wanted to tell things to. The person I wanted to celebrate with. The person I wanted beside me when life was difficult, not just when everything was beautiful. And that is when I understood something important. Love is not about finding someone who removes all uncertainty. Love is about finding someone who makes you willing to face uncertainty. Someone who makes you say, I do not know what tomorrow brings, but I know who I want beside me while I discover it. That was you, and I almost lost that. Not because another person was better, not because someone else had something you did not, but because I temporarily forgot the difference between peace and emptiness. The easier choice was not necessarily the right choice. The quieter road was not necessarily the happier road. And the person who asked less from my heart was not the person my heart was searching for. But there was a moment when I almost convinced myself otherwise. A moment when I almost chose comfort over connection. And that is the part I need to be honest about. Because if love is built on truth, then I cannot only tell you the beautiful parts. I have to tell you the difficult parts, too. There was a night when I sat alone and asked myself a question I was afraid to answer. If she walked away forever tomorrow, would you be relieved, or would you finally understand what you lost? And the answer came immediately. It would destroy me. Not because I could not continue living. I would. People continue. People survive. People wake up the next morning and keep moving even when their heart feels heavy. But surviving is not the same as living, and I realized that a future without you was not impossible. It was just not the future I wanted. That difference matters. Because sometimes we tell ourselves, I will be okay without them. And maybe we will. But the question is not whether we can survive without someone. The question is whether we want to choose a life where we have to. That question changed everything for me. And then something happened, something small, something that most people would overlook. But to me, it felt like a final opportunity, a reminder that maybe the story was not finished, a reminder that maybe two people can lose their way and still find their way back if they are willing to be honest. But honesty requires something that many people avoid. It requires admitting when you were wrong. It requires saying, I was scared. Not blaming. Not creating excuses, not pretending circumstances were the reason, just admitting the truth. I was scared. I was scared because you mattered. I was scared because I could imagine losing you. I was scared because for the first time in a long time, I had something I could not replace. And maybe that is what love really does. It reminds us that some things are not replaceable. Some people cannot be substituted. Some moments cannot be recreated. You can build something new. You can meet new people. You can create another chapter. But there are certain connections that leave a signature on your heart. And you were that for me. But I also know something else. Love cannot be a one-sided sacrifice. A person cannot keep reaching forever. A person cannot keep waiting forever. A person cannot keep wondering forever. And that is why I need to ask you something. If someone finally came to you with the truth they were too afraid to say before, would you still have space in your heart to hear them, or would the silence have already changed you? Would you still believe their feelings were real, or would you think they only returned because they were afraid of losing you? These questions matter because timing matters. Love is not only about feeling. It is also about action. It is about whether two people choose each other at the same moment, and that was the hardest lesson I learned. A heart can be full of love and still cause pain if it waits too long to express it. Actions matter. But so do choices. And I almost made the wrong choice. I almost allowed my fear to decide my future. I almost let hesitation speak louder than my heart. But then I remembered something. The people we love do not need us to be perfect. They need us to be present. They need us to be honest. They need us to stop hiding behind reasons and finally show up. And that is what I am trying to do now. Show up, not as someone who has every answer, not as someone who has never been afraid, but as someone who finally understands that losing you would hurt more than risking everything for you. And there is one thing I have never told you. One final truth that I kept hidden because I did not know how you would receive it. The reason this moment became so important was not because I was afraid you would leave. It was because I realized I had already started losing you while you were still there. I was losing the small moments, the trust, the closeness, the feeling that we could tell each other anything, and that scared me more than goodbye, because goodbye is an ending, but slowly becoming strangers while still caring about each other. That is a different kind of heartbreak. That is the kind of heartbreak nobody prepares you for. So I made a decision. Not an easy decision, not a comfortable decision, a real decision. I decided I would stop hiding. I decided I would stop waiting for the perfect moment. I decided that if I had something worth saying, I would say it before regret became the only thing left between us. But there is still one thing you need to know. Because the reason I almost walked away, reason I almost chose the safer path, reason I almost convinced myself that losing you would be easier, was not what you think. The real reason was hidden deeper. It was connected to something I was carrying for years. something I never wanted you to see, something that made me question whether I deserved the kind of love you were offering, and when I finally understood it, folds his tit. When I finally faced it, AP realized the biggest battle was never between me and another person. It was never between two choices. It was between the person I was afraid I was and the person I needed to become, because the truth is, AP was never truly afraid of losing you. I was afraid that if you stayed, you would finally see all of me. And I did not know if all of me was someone you could love. That was the fear I carried. That was the secret I protected. That was the wall I built. But you deserve to know what was behind that wall. You deserve the complete truth. And I am finally ready to tell you. Because some truths arrive late, they still have the power to change everything.